Welcome to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions to get the most out of your career journey. We'll introduce you to the AXR network of established senior leaders and a hand-picked group of future aspiring leaders who have it all in front of them. You'll learn what it's like in the top job and how to get there. Your hosts from AXR's specialist sales and marketing recruitment team will also land bonus episodes for you on how to work with recruiters, write a resume, and smash an interview, as well as our very popular market updates. It's the podcast that has it all. You can't get this career advice anywhere else. Welcome to another episode of Your Future in Sales and Marketing. I'm Andrew Kennick. I'm a specialist recruiter of senior sales and category roles at AXR Recruitment and Search. Today, I'm delighted to be joined on the pod by Kylie Gleeson. Kylie is Global Group Executive and CEO for Consumer and Retail at Quantium. This is a really great discussion. We talk about Kylie's very diverse international career journey, what's led her into the world of Quantium, what that business is doing at the bleeding edge of applying AI to FMCG. And we cover in a fair bit of detail Kylie's own views on AI, how it's impacting the industry, and what you as a future or current leader can be doing to get on board with that. We hope you enjoy this episode. Kylie, thank you so much for coming on.
A pleasure.
Great to see you. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good.
Looking forward to our chat.
Me too, very much so. So we'll kick off with our usual icebreaker. What's your favourite brand and why? And it can't be one that you've worked on.
Oh gosh, that sort of narrows it down. Okay. Well, I can easily say Coke Zero, which is kind of, I'll say that I worked for Coke for many years, as you know from probably my CV, and I'm 100% a daily drinker and a mad passionate fan. So I'd say that sort of came into play as a brand, I guess, after I'd left Coke, but it was definitely from my time at Coke that came into the repertoire and has certainly stuck with me long after I left the company. So incredibly brand loyal, I think, to that one.
It must be a sizable part of their business now, Coke Zero. It seems to be everywhere. I mean, I don't know whether you'd know, but I mean, it does seem to have really taken off in the last few.
Well, yeah, look, we work with Coke in 3 different markets, and Coke Zero is going well. It's
going well. Tell us a little bit about life before career. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up down in the Sutherland Shire. So, but interestingly, probably from about the age of 10, I went to school in Strathfield, which was not a common thing. My father believed that the best gift you could give your children is education, and he felt that the best schools were not immediately around where we lived. So from the age of 10, it was year 5, I travelled an hour and a half, hour and 3/4 each way to school. So up at 6 a.m, out the door, rain, hail and shine for 8 years to go to school in Strathfield, and then returning home after that. So yes, it was great. Very appreciative of the education.
Probably the worst commute you've ever done. Got it out of the way.
It is
nice and early.
It's definitely scarred me sort of later on. But I think the unintended maybe benefit of that in some way was a little bit of grit and resilience that came with that.
I'm sure.
Versus a nice, what would have been a 10-minute stroll to school.
Yeah, cushy. Yeah,
cushy.
Exactly.
Cushy. So I think that set me up nicely on the 2 fronts. The education, yep, thanks for that. I know it wasn't easy for them to sort of provide that. But yeah, the grit and resilience has gone a long way as well as part of that.
And travel has been a consistent theme through your career, which we'll come on and unpack a little bit. So after you got your start in hospitality, you kind of cut your teeth in FMCG with Coca-Cola and then moved on to Kantar Retail.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that shift. What was behind that decision, and how did that help shape your perspective seeing FMCG almost from the outside in?
Yeah. Look, maybe before I talk about why the shift, you give a little bit of context around, within FMCG, because I do think FMCG as an industry is one of the few industries where you can have such a diverse career. And I say that to a lot of people who come to me and talk to me about their own careers. So, I joined Coca-Cola originally as part of their sort of grad management program, like what feels like a million years ago. But their ability to rotate you through different parts of their business, be that, sales, marketing, supply chain, ops, finance, and the same with, when I went on to then work with Nestlé, same types of things, mergers and acquisitions, strategy, you name it. The diversity of career that you can have within FMCG is unrivaled, I've found, by by many other industries, which makes it quite unique and quite special from that point of view. But when I decided that I would go and work for Kantar Consulting, what sort of drove that decision was going, well, I want to actually have the ability to, yes, really fine-tune that strategy consulting muscle and that ability to identify business issues and work on big, meaty problems, but to do that not just within FMCG but across industries. So I think when you're working for those sort of bigger consulting houses, that's the type of exposure that you get. And you can see best practice. You see a lot of examples too of companies who've got it entirely wrong, but you also get that to understand what do you need to do to actually drive change and resolve that issue. So, and it certainly served me well because by the time I came back into an FMCG company, being FrieslandCampina, ultimately that I came back into, when we then hired BCG to work with us on multinational, multi-million-dollar projects, when you've been on the consulting side, you know how to actually get the most out of big consultancies that come to work for you. So there's a kind of extra benefit that
Absolutely.
comes from it, if that makes sense.
So early in career, you've had rapid sort of cross-functional experience with Coke, and then this accelerator in terms of perspective for Kantar. It's probably no coincidence that you then had the career that you've had, because that's established that early breadth. Yeah. So you mentioned FrieslandCampina.
Yeah.
So spent nearly 8 years there.
Yep.
Regional director across Asia, Africa, Middle East, all this, a global commercial director. So you went international. What were kind of one or two decisions during that period that you would call sort of genuinely defining?
Yeah. And and many listeners might not know FrieslandCampina. It's a very large Dutch-based dairy company. So think like a Fonterra of Europe almost. Which decisions? Maybe I'll answer that by saying it's a series of multiple decisions, but under the one theme, working across multiple markets for that business, based in Singapore. I think some of those decisions that were made around ensuring or making a choice between building and developing local market talent versus parachuting expats in to do key roles, all of those smaller decisions that led to an incredibly diverse and very strong local team, that was probably the most impactful series of decisions, both from a business perspective and also from a personal learning perspective. So, I know a lot of people talk about, diversity in terms of targets, but I can tell you my experience of building that diverse team, the business benefit that actually comes from that is quite significant. By the time I left FrieslandCampina, I remember sitting around the boardroom in Singapore, and I counted 19 individual nationalities around the table. I remember just reflecting, going, wow, that's impressive. And sometimes it's harder to do that because when you hire people in your own image, it's sometimes easier. Got the same personality type as me. That's great. We're going to get on really quickly. But oftentimes it's the ones that you hire that are quite different perspectives, where you actually might be harder in the shorter term. But if you can become a high-performing team and orchestrate together, the compounding effect of that is, significantly stronger business growth.
Yeah.
So I got to see that firsthand.
And I think it takes a really secure leader to embrace that and bring on people who think differently, because you are opening yourself up to be challenged.
Yeah.
But I also like the articulation of diversity as a genuine performance accelerator and enhancer, rather than something which can be viewed as kind of tokenistic. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. And then later on came the shift to dunnhumby. So global FMCG into data science, customer loyalty. What was the steepest part of that learning curve, making that transition?
Yeah, like the move to dunnhumby, again, like most of my career moves, I'm always looking for what is that skill set or area that I really want to do, what's the extra string in the bow that I want to add as part of building my own sort of capabilities. And I definitely viewed dunnhumby as a place of, that advanced analytics, machine learning at the time. So I wanted to add that capability, really strengthen that capability. But the steepest learning curve actually was not necessarily anything to do with the analytics. It was actually the culture. So unlike FMCG, and I'd work for some very process-oriented, very big FMCG players, the culture of dunnhumby and Quantium's quite similar in a way. They are, even at scale, they are like large startups. They're innovative, they're agile. There's limited process in many ways, certainly compared to an FMCG player. So my first reaction to that was, oh God, if only I could just implement all the Swiss processes from Nestlé across dunnhumby, wouldn't that be wonderful? And then you realise actually, if you were to do that, you kill the very thing that makes them so powerful and unique. And that's the reason that Tesco or Woolworths and hundreds of other companies pay tens of millions for companies like this, because they want that innovative, agile, organisation that has been somewhat removed from their own very structured businesses. So that actually was the learning curve of joining dunnhumby.
Yeah, and you raise a good point around the business environment that you operate in, and it's not a case of just transferring what worked somewhere else into that environment. And we see it all the time because businesses will hire from blue chip FMCG, and the person from that business comes in going, great, I just need to apply the Unilever, the Nestle, the Reckitt way onto this business. And quite often that meets reality, and it's not as feasible as they maybe hoped it would be. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Then came the move to Quantium. Why did you make that move?
Quantium had been a company that, throughout my career was one that I had sort of watched and admired. Australian company, 20 plus years, still founder led, which I found very appealing. And again, for the same purposes, at that stage, I wanted to work at the cutting edge of AI, and with a company that is not just claiming to be AI, because every second company is claiming to be that right now, but one that actually is a practitioner with dirt under the fingernails. And it's not just something that Quantium themselves would say. If I look at the number one global user of Anthropic's Claude is actually Quantium. 80% of people within the company are using it on every single task they do every day. The second largest user of Anthropic's Claude, or maybe you, could be you.
Catching up.
Could be you. But it's actually Anthropic themselves. So we are ahead of Anthropic globally in terms of usage. And
that's a great fact.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
When Google stood up in Las Vegas a month back at their Cloud Next conference, they announced 7 partners that they had invited to establish a practice to set up enterprise AI agents and deploy that on Google Cloud's infrastructure. Quantium was one of those 6 or 7 companies. But beyond that, Google stood up, and the number one company, the first company that came out of their mouth was Quantium. And then I go, that's great. And that's actually because it's the practitioner focus, like that real usage, real use cases. So that's why, what attracted me to Quantium. And that's what has, made me want to stay, because of the quality and the breadth of capability that exists, within the organization.
And I suspect almost everyone that listens to this will know of Quantium, but their understanding of what the business does will vary quite widely. So tell us simply, what does Quantium do? What's its purpose? And then place your role within that context for us.
Okay. If I had to put it in a very simple context, Quantium across the board combines some of the largest and most significant data assets with proprietary analytics and AI, and uses that to solve businesses' biggest problems and across industries. So in the context of my role, I look after sort of what we call consumer or FMCG globally, and I look after retail globally as the CEO. So we apply that 3 combination of the data, the proprietary analytics and AI, and we apply that to the biggest problems that our clients are facing in very real and tangible ways, to either drive an efficiency, amplify an impact that they're able to have in a business, but in a way where you see it showing up within the P&L, not in years, in a matter of weeks and months. And that's probably the difference. So at a very simple level, like, for an FMCG player, that they would have a certain set of business issues and opportunities, and whether it's in financial services or in banking or in government or in legal firms, the breadth of companies that we support is quite significant. But It's all the common theme of applying those three.
And there's a hint of an ROI on AI, which is refreshing given what you hear in the broader sort of market. And so to that point on AI, what, from your perspective, what does good look like when it comes to integrating AI for a consumer goods business, and what separates those that are doing it well from those that are not?
Yeah. We're working with hundreds of different clients, around the world on this. And so we ask that question actually of ourselves the whole time to try to capture, like, what is the secret sauce? So I'll give you a few perspectives on that. The first is the ones that are actually getting more of an ROI, as you say, or being more effective in how they're using AI. The CEO is actually using AI themselves. They are driving the agenda top down. They are leading from the front, and they are setting the drumbeat for their organizations. If it's starting and bubbling up somewhere else in the organization, or it's just an IT project, they are not the ones that are globally getting ahead. The second point that we probably find is that AI does not exist in a vacuum. It exists within the context of your individual business. So what are the issues you need to overcome as an organization? What are the opportunities where you can amplify your impact? And to be able to point AI and that proprietary analytics at those business problems and to orchestrate solutions that, again, show up in a tangible way. If it doesn't show up in the P&L in some way, you are just talking AI theory.
It's a bit of a question without notice, but I'm interested to get your perspective on this. What would you say to a business leader, a CEO, a GM who goes, I know I'm supposed to be leading the charge on AI, but I am so lost. I don't know where to start. And maybe they don't have the people around them that can tell them. What would your advice be to somebody who finds themselves in that situation?
That is incredibly common, got to say. So if you are a CEO out there and you're thinking, God, I don't know where to start, everyone's thinking that. The imperative is you have to just lean in and get going. Be vulnerable, just say what you don't know and get in and start using it. Stop trying to figure out, I see a lot of times clients will go, let's do a longer term strategy. Old ways of working, forget it. Tech's moving too quickly. Don't do that. Mobilize your organization, set the mandate and start leaning in. If you need support, get support, be that from Quantium or, other organizations. But the imperative is to start the journey and point the AI towards your biggest business issues and challenges. They don't change. Just your ability to solve those problems in an accelerated, more impactful way. That's what AI is bringing. So think of it from those terms, but don't wait.
And you've got to be curious.
You do have to,
as we're going to come on and talk about.
Yeah.
On that point, what is so a bit around what's the sort of the capability gap you see in the businesses you work with around data and AI, and then in terms of the implications for talent, maybe I'd ask you to actually talk about how this has shaped your talent acquisition at Quantium, because I think it's really interesting. Yeah.
So a couple months back, Adam Driussi, our founder and CEO, and Peter Tonner, our chairman, took 12, 15 CEOs from Australia on an AI trip to the US. And they spent time with Anthropic's founders, with Google, with AWS, and many of the sort of leading VCs in the market. And there was one overarching theme around capabilities that kept coming through. And it's now, you see it in a lot of the industry press around this concept of that capability overhang, right? Which essentially means that the difference between what AI can actually do and how people in businesses or as individuals are actually using it. And that gap is only widening. One of the CEOs from that trip had said, the AI models that exist today can already do what you will only imagine tomorrow. So it is racing ahead at a significant speed, and most companies are not necessarily keeping up, but the capability is massive already, which brings us back to then, so how do we at Quantium change our recruitment strategy or approach accordingly? And, and I think, we've talked about this before around the number one thing that we're actually hiring for now is curiosity. Because if you are not curious to go, what might happen if I do that? Or could I leverage that to solve this problem? What can this new model do? What can that new approach take? If you are not intrinsically like that, you are not going to succeed in this AI-driven environment. And so it's a difficult thing to train for you're either intrinsically curious or you're not. And the ones in our business who have accelerated the most, who have the greatest upward career trajectory, are all by far the most curious ones.
And there's been a big shift in the recruitment philosophy at Quantium, right? Because when we spoke before, you were talking about it was best of the best academically, because you hire for analytical brain power is kind of what you're after.
Yeah.
And clearly, still a requirement, you've got to be smart and good at your job. Yeah. But the curiosity part is real for you. And how are you, I don't know, maybe it's not a perfect answer, how are you assessing curiosity? How are you identifying that?
Yeah, and you're right. To get to join our, data science cohort, you would have had to have finished, in the top 1% in the HSC to get into the degrees that we recruit from, and then in the top 10% of graduates. But we know that actually that is not enough anymore. So how do you assess for curiosity? Some of it we're tackling through even just the questions that we ask. So we're not expecting people who join necessarily to be AI experts, but if we ask them and say, "Oh, just tell us an example if your business isn't necessarily using it, tell us how you individually are." If they are unable to give any examples or say, "Hey, I've created this, or I've built my own, agent to do XYZ in my personal life," or, "I've read this in the press," or "I've seen this," you can hear by the way that they talk whether they're curious. And that's one of sort of the leading indicators of that. I shared a story, I think, with you before. We had one young grad. We've run a lot of edge programs where we have, CEOs come and spend time at Quantium, almost like to talk about how they get started, going back to your previous questions. And we had a young grad who at the beginning of each session would hover outside the door. Hadn't been in the company very long. And he did this, 4 or 5 times until eventually our head of P&C said to him, "What are you doing?" Because the CEOs are all filing in and he's there. And he was so curious again about what was going on inside. What were all the CEOs talking about? So he ended up eventually said, "Yeah, great, go grab a seat up the back." So this young grad, he sat at the back and again was just absorbing like a sponge. And then based on what was said, he'd go out and start again just trying new things and experimenting around new things. That's intrinsic curiosity in a very, basic example.
I can't wait to see where that person is in 10 or 20 years. It'll be fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, top of his cohort.
Yeah. You strike me as someone that's displayed genuine curiosity through your whole career because you've had such a diverse path. You're clearly open to experience and you've sought out these different experiences. If someone's listening to this podcast now and they're a fairly accomplished mid-career sales marketing leader and they go, "I want to do what she does," what's your career advice to them?
Where we are right now in the industry, my advice to you is that you won't lose your job to AI, but you will lose it to the person next to you who can wield AI in a better way to drive business results and impact. So lean in massively, heavily. No one else is going to do it for you. Be super curious and understand how AI is moving and transforming organizations, because that's the single biggest skill set that you need to build. Work for companies who are at the practitioner end of AI. Forget the strategy, and ones who claim it. Go where you can actually get that tangible experience. And in parallel to that, build your commercial acumen. Being a functional expert in one particular area or understanding AI deeply, still need to apply it back to a company's P&L. You still need to be able to understand, if I do this, what is the impact? What are the levers that I can pull to sort of manage and orchestrate my business, and how does AI help you do that? So the two things need to be true in parallel, and don't wait until you've got the big job to then go, I need to all of a sudden now try to start to understand how to manage a business and manage a P&L. Get around that earlier.
Yeah. And that's a much more articulate way of landing the same point I land with national account managers all the time. 5 years ago, being a whiz in Excel was still a real strength as a NAM. You could do your own modeling. You could work. That's no longer the case. Oh. So develop your ability to look at 2 to 3 different options, understand the commercial implications of those options, and then work on your ability to influence others to get on board with your recommendation and be able to defend it. That's the skill set of the future. Yeah.
And, well before I had some of my biggest roles, I remember working at Nestlé, and my boss there at the time was his superpower. Jim liked to talk about individual superpowers, but his superpowers was that financial management, not just compiling and reading a P&L, but being able to look at it, understand what the levers are, understand what actions they need to take, understand how to bring others on the journey. So I just used to watch him intently to go out, how is he doing it? What choices is he making? How is he going about engaging other people around that? And how is he pulling those levers to orchestrate a result for the business? And also, observing when, times when he also didn't get it right because other things, changed. And then how did he respond to that? But I can remember that, and I often refer back to that when I talk to team members around building that commercial acumen and starting that process early on.
Yeah. Talking of team members, you've led teams for a very, very long time. What's the leadership lesson that took you the longest to learn, or is the one that you wear the most scars from learning?
Yeah, Christian, plenty of scars, I'm sure, along the way. Probably that we talk a lot at the moment, I think, around authenticity as a leader. And I think early on in your career, there can be a tendency to think authenticity means I'm the same the whole time. And there's nuance in that. And you learn that over time, that as a leader, what you want to be firm on is your values, your principles, and what you believe in. However, how you might show up actually should be fluid, and insofar as situationally aware, right? And certainly when I worked across so many different markets and cultures in global roles, the way business is done, cultural norms, even different individuals, introverted, extroverts, or the whole gamut. People who are excited about work, people who are stressed and disengaged, you need to show up in a different way and flex your leadership style and unapologetically be somewhat fluid in that, because you have to meet people where they are, and have the right tonality and approach for that situation. But what holds very strong and firm is actually your underlying values, about what you believe. So that is the authentic piece. How you bring that then in different situations is where I think that sort of leadership nuance comes into play. And it takes you a while to learn that it's not just the one vanilla flavor of yourself the whole time, but the values stay true.
I think a big part of that is actually emotional regulation. Can you regulate yourself so you actually can choose how you want to show up in different situations and remember those principles and the way you want to operate? And I think when pressure comes on for leaders, that's probably the part a lot of them struggle with without even realizing that's the thing they're actually finding difficult. Yeah. I'm going to tee this one up for you. I know what you're going to say. What does the next 5 years look like in FMCG sales and marketing? Go on.
And we
knock it away.
And we did chuckle about this indeed, didn't we, before, right?
Yeah.
You walked into the Quantium boardroom right now and you gave a 5-year, even a 3-year strategy, you'd be politely shown the door. Technology is just moving too fast right now that just gets into complete theoretical mode. So we focus back on, having that plan that plays the ball that is in front of us. Like what needs to be true. The change is going to keep coming. It's not just about how do we survive this next wave of change, because no sooner are you going to get over or under that wave than another one is going to come. So how do you keep riding the waves, build curiosity as an organizational, skill set, and be able to drive results that where you are thriving in this environment? 3-year strategies is just not going to help in the current environment. One of the things we spoke about before is looking at looking at the industry and the challenges that is coming at it, the FMCG industry, the retail industry will be under immense pressure over the next 12 months. This is not a time for AI theory. This is a time for the practical application of AI to really shift the needle. Companies are going to need to respond to cost price increases that are going through the roof. They're going to need to do more with less. They're going to need to respond and meet their customer or consumer base who is increasingly under financial pressure. Let's look at research recently. If 50% of people under or self-defining as under financial strain, 1 in 4 Australians, I saw a statistic last week come out, is skipping meals to be able to afford their day-to-day, which if we sit in that for a minute, in Australia, 1 in 4 skipping meals to make the budget stretch. So for FMCG players and retailers alike, there is a lot of pressure they will need to meet. So when trying to do less with more, you need to drive efficiency. Efficiencies through your business, like your life depends on it. Your business life depends on it. Because for some businesses, their longevity actually will depend on how they can respond during this time. And approaching AI at that ground level rather than at a theory level of, here's my 5-year strategy, come down a level. Point AI analytics directly at your business issues, because that's the year ahead. Forget the 3-year strategy.
Yeah. And
hopefully people won't be offended by that. We've become used to that sort of thinking because we find that we just can't plan.
I can almost hear the sigh of relief from people going, are you telling me the annual 5YP process might become a thing of the past? And probably a few execs going, what am I going to do with all my time?
Totally.
And on your point of Australians skipping meals to make budgets, the ones who can afford to eat however much they want, half of them may well be on GLP-1s in the next few years as well, which is another thing that's coming for the industry.
All adding to the dynamics, right?
100%. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. Been a really great conversation. Yeah, it's been, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Your Future in Sales and Marketing. We really hope that you enjoyed today's pod. Please do connect with Kylie on LinkedIn. Let her know if you enjoyed the episode. As always, reach out to me or any of the team at AXR if there's anything that's come from today's discussion that you want to discuss around your career journey or your hiring decisions. See you next time. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's inspiring sales and marketing leaders. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.